The issue of race is alive and well today. Racism exists, and it's being used and exploited. But I'm talking about racism towards white people, especially white men. Whiteness as an institution, white privilege and white guilt. It's being exploited and used as a weapon by the left and by black people, particularly the youth in groups like Black Lives Matter, but not even so much by then anymore. They seem to be dying out a bit. But particularly by youths in colleges and universities, like what you see happening in Evergreen College, for example.
And so I'm just letting you know that slavery still has repercussions in society today. And that is what we're here about. Those repercussions. It doesn't go away. It's not over.
Where students are shouting down the dean, the professors, faculty members, making demands, safe spaces for blacks and people of color, separate living spaces for black students. And the reason for all this being white supremacy and white oppression. And all of this stemming from, yes, the fact that the ancestors of black Americans were slaves. The idea that these black students who are in universities and colleges across America are somehow oppressed by the white staff and by white supremacy in general, because ancestors of theirs, not them, but their ancestors, were slaves of white men, not us. So this entitles them to this sort of behavior? Really? This is ludicrous. And even worse, that it's allowed to persist, and in some cases even applauded or encouraged. The fact that these young people who are in higher education learning institutions, who are being told and made to feel that they are oppressed and that it is by white people and white supremacy, is pure madness. And to use and blame it on a practice that is outlawed in America and in the West by white people, that happened a couple of 100 years ago and that lasted less than 200 years in the United States, and that no one alive today, an American, has suffered as a slave, nor have any owned a slave, while in non-white, non-West African countries today, now, slavery still exists. Thinking about this while seeing it happen more and more across college campuses, but also in pop culture, mainstream media, the news, everywhere. It's okay to be racist towards whites, especially men, straight white men, while blacks and other people of color get to play the victim card, the race card, oppression, and literally making demands for reparations. As if affirmative action, which brings blacks to the front of the line on virtually everything, while pushing whites, and even Asians, to the back and without merit, isn't enough. This leftist culture that pushes an egalitarian agenda for all except white men, making it okay to freely attack whites, to demonize us, and after all that still call us racist. And then on a social media platform that I don't even use anymore, someone that I knew for real, in real life, whom I no longer associate with, had put out a post saying that white people like to claim everything that they've invented. This was what they said, invented, except slavery. At this point, I was unable to continue my relationship with this person, to say the least. And so I thought about this for a while, and I thought about slavery. Why is it that whites are blamed for slavery? What about the people who actually sold the slaves in the first place? Why are they allowed off the hook? The origins of slavery go back to as far as pre-recorded history and has existed all around the world in many cultures. Slavery was known in civilizations as old as Sumer, as well as almost every ancient civilization, such as ancient Egypt, ancient China, the Akkadian Empire, Assyria, Babylonia, ancient Iran, ancient Greece, India, the Roman Empire, the Arab Islamic Caliphate, and Sultanate, I don't know how to say that, Nubia, and the pre-Columbian civilizations of the Americas. Since the beginning of human civilization, basically. But yet the only time you hear about slavery is when it's about slavery in America and the ancestors of black Americans. White people are referred to as the devil, evil, oppressive, white supremacists, and how awful the USA is. Yet this doesn't seem to stop non-white migration into the United States from all over the world. Why is that? If the United States is this horrible, oppressive place full of awful white supremacists, why do all these non-white people keep coming here? There must be a reason. All the free stuff, maybe? Healthcare, money, benefits, safety, jobs. Or maybe it isn't so bad here after all. Maybe Western culture is the best in the world. Maybe America is the best place in the world. Or maybe it's to replace all the white people with non-white people. If white people are so terrible and evil for having owned slaves, which white people did not invent the concept of slavery, then why did white people end slavery in white Western countries? We fought a bloody war over slavery, and it was literally a bloody war. Many, many white people died in that war. And yet, slavery still exists today in brown and black nations. So, what about the African participation in slave trade? Europeans didn't just go into Africa and pluck people out of their homes in the middle of the night. And if you think that's what happened, you're severely wrong. Like I said earlier, slave trading has pretty much always existed in human civilization. African states, black people, played a key role in the slave trade. Slavery was already a common practice among sub-Saharan Africa, long before even the Arabs and the Berbers and the Europeans came along and got involved in slavery. Such situations were a mixture of debt slavery, punishment for a crime, the enslavement of prisoners of war, and the birth of slave children to other slaves. Prior to the 16th century, the bulk of slaves exported from Africa were shipped from East Africa to the Arabian Peninsula. An estimated 80,000 Africans died each year before ever reaching the slave markets of Zanzibar. Chieftains, black Africans, would barter their slaves to the Arabs, the Berbers, the Ottoman, and the Europeans for rum, spices, cloth, and other goods. So basically, black Africans were trading black Africans like currency for goods, needed goods. There were slaves who were usually captured or prisoners who were sold for goods. The kings, we was kings, they was kings, sold their war captives to the transatlantic slave trade. Otherwise, they would have been killed in a ceremony known as the annual customs. Most likely, had your ancestors not been sold into slavery, they would have been killed off by other blacks, by other Africans. Your ancestors were either sold into slavery or killed by their African contemporaries, other blacks. So in some way, if it weren't for your ancestors being slaves brought here to America, you wouldn't be here today, living free and complaining about your oppression, which they actually suffered. Not you. Your ancestors did suffer, but they lived, as opposed to being killed. more than likely you may have never existed because your ancestors would have been killed by other Africans. Think about that. In 1807, when white Great Britain made illegal the international trade of slaves, the King of Bani, which is now Nigeria, or in Nigeria, was horrified at this conclusion of the practice of slavery, and had this to say: "We think the trade must go on. That is the verdict of our oracle and the priests. They say that your country," meaning Britain, "however great, can never stop a trade ordained by God himself." This is what black African kings said to the white people who were outlawing slavery. This is what he and his people thought of other black Africans. The black kings were pissed off that the white people wanted to end slavery. In 1840, King Getzo of Dahomey said, "The slave trade is the ruling principle of my people. It is the source of glory and wealth." This is a black man talking about other blacks as slaves to trade. This is after slavery had been long over in America as well. Oh, and by the way, during the time of the Regency of Algiers in North Africa in the 19th century, 1.5 million Christians and Europeans were captured and forced into slavery as well. So the whole idea that it's only black people that have ever been slaves and enslaved only by white people is utter nonsense and ridiculous. So why all this anger solely directed towards whites in a country where slavery was outlawed and no one has been a slave in over 200 years, where blacks are just as free and equal to whites? You even have affirmative action, which ironically grants you many privileges over whites and Asians too. But yet you are made to believe that you are oppressed, that blacks are oppressed by whites. Made to feel this way by people with an agenda, whether it's political or financial. While slavery exists today in Africa, the continent of Africa is one of the most problematic places for contemporary slavery, such as the trading of children in modern Nigeria and Benin. In parts of Ghana, female virgins can be taken as sex slaves for punishment and payment. In, I don't know if I'm saying this right, Mauritania, it is estimated that up to 600,000 men, women, and children are currently enslaved today and used as bonded labor. During the Darfur conflict, many people have been captured. Sex slaves and forced labor are common in the Republic of Congo, and it goes on and on and on. If Black Lives matter so much, instead of pretending you are oppressed today in America, wanting to reap the benefits of white liberal guilt on the backs of those black slaves who did truly suffer, why not fight for the truly oppressed, who are actually oppressed still today in black and brown countries? Just like the feminists here today, who whine and cry about the white male patriarchy, while ignoring the truly oppressed women in sex slave situations in Africa or the true patriarchal Islamic cultures in the Middle East. But no, you're just cowards and weak-minded sheep who are simply following a script created by people with an agenda. Those who want to create division and those who want to profit off the chaos which it creates. Instead, you are nothing more than useful idiots, whining and carrying on and making all this noise and distractions, screaming about being oppressed while in your overpriced universities and college campuses, safe in your safe spaces and fighting your first world problems while actually ignoring the plight of the truly oppressed in third world nations, those who are still slaves today. not by white people, not by the white man. This is obviously gone too far. You know, these universities, these college campuses like Evergreen, it's out of control and it needs to stop. The whole idea of being able to cry oppression while living in the freest country in the world and demonizing white people for something that they've actually helped to stop, at least in Western culture, at least in Western countries. I think those truly who care about black lives, who themselves are black and want to make a difference, should maybe study this legitimately and go to these nations where this is happening and help fight for the freedom of the truly oppressed. Instead of like creating this division and hatred between Western people in Western nations. White people today being attacked for stuff that happened a couple of centuries ago, that we have no control over, that no one today has suffered under. It's just being used as an excuse for victimization, for victimhood. And the more that this so-called oppression persists and is used to demonize white people, the more white people will rise up against it. This is just a fact of life. If you keep pushing us into a corner, what do you expect but for us to react? It's ridiculous that this idea of white people as the slave master, as the oppressor, is being perpetuated. And it's even more ridiculous when it's being pushed by white liberals, the white guilt liberals, who are allowing non-whites to attack other whites because they have some sense of guilt, real or unreal. I think most of it is unreal. Because think about this. What are you guilty about in your life, truly, personally? What do you feel guilt over? Is it over things that you've done that are regrettable? Or is it things that you have no control over, nothing to do, nothing that you've ever participated in? Who truly feels guilty about something that they didn't participate or do themselves? There are things I feel guilty about in my life that I've done that I regret doing, of course. Anyone with, any sense of decency would feel this. But to feel guilt about something that happened in another life that you have no part of is utter nonsense. Sure, you can look at it and say it was a horrible thing that happened, but that's why white people ended it. Because it was a horrible practice and it was ineffectual to boot. This is an ongoing discussion, obviously, and it's one that needs to be solved. How it will be solved, I can't answer that for you right now. Anyway, so what do we learn from this? White people didn't start slavery. Africans were slaving each other for centuries before white people ever got involved in it. White people ended slavery in white Western countries. And today it is being used to oppress white people. If you have anything else to add to this, please do so down in the comments below. If you like this video, go ahead, give it a thumbs up, like it, share it if you think it's worth sharing. And if you haven't already done so, please subscribe to my channel. And yeah, that's it. I'm out of here. Till the next time.